My name is Money Mike Fofo, or you may know me as X from Expert Data Solutions. I'm a professional data scientist, economist, marketer, and more importantly, a creative. Currently building some beta software to help patch up leaks. I'm going to give you guys an example of how a product manager will actually go about like solving real world business problems for a technical project.
Hi, my name is Marlon, and I'm working with Mike on my auto parts business. I was able to make sales by posting to Facebook Marketplace, but the customer support and the inventory management alone got way too overwhelming. Mike stepped in to create the improved system, and now we're working together to improve my online shop design. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Mike comes up with that will help minimize the customer support required to sell my auto parts online.
So whether you're watching this because you're a student or you're someone who's trying to get into being a product manager, or you're a prospective client and you want to know what it would look like for us to work together to actually solve a problem for you, we're about to go through an example. All right. So in this real world situation, let's just go through the use case that has prompted this in the first place. So what I have sketched out is essentially where we want to end up. So this diagram or this like dashboard that has basically our ticket support information. So let's go through like the real world business use case. All right. So Marlon is selling auto parts online, and Marlon is using several marketing channels. All right. So he's using several marketing channels and several sales channels. And what they notice is like while posting to multiple marketing channels is increasing their sales, it's also increasing the amount of customer support that's required, right? So in this screenshot, for those who are looking at my screen, this is like just the sheer number of messages. And this is just from one account, all right? And if I scroll over to another platform where they're selling, this is a whole other platform where they have to manage communication. So a CRM, so a customer relationship management system, is a bit challenging when you are, posted to multiple platforms. So I had to like brainstorm on like what is the best way to go about solving this problem for this business owner. So at the stage I am right now, what I'm doing is just like presenting the facts, right? Like going over what's the business use case, and how we could just like go about potentially solving the problem. So the first thing to put this into context, I just want to go back over for people who may not like be super familiar with what a product manager, as far as like tech goes, like what exactly a product manager does. So I'm gonna pause this for a second, and I'm just gonna give like a high level definition of like what a product manager actually does, so that you guys can better put this tutorial into context. All right, so I'm going to pause this for a second at 3 minutes, and I'll come back after the 3 minute mark to just go over like what a product manager actually does. All right, so I just found this Venn diagram that better shows in a very concise way, pretty much like the role of a product manager, especially a technical product manager. So this kind of like mix between someone who has responsibilities from the technology perspective, business perspective, design perspective, and UX. So someone, I heard like someone kind of coined it as like a product CEO. So you guys are gonna see me in real life, kind of like what I would do, what I do as a product manager. And again, if you're watching this as a business owner, how will it solve a problem? All right. So my job in this project is to understand the business use case, understand like how we would go about actually solving this problem from a technical perspective, because this is an online shop. So the solution is going to be a technical. That's why you need a technical product manager if any of what you need updated boils down to any updates with something that's to do online or with technology. So if it's an app, whether it's your website, you still need someone who has a technical understanding. So I have over a decade of experience, as a developer and in data. So what I first do is understand, like, from a business perspective, like what is happening and like what kind of impact is having on the business. So the business impact in this situation is they are actually, like, a lot of money is going into they're losing a lot of money. Their labor cost is up, right? So if they are spending, like, 4 hours a day responding to customers, meanwhile they're only like netting $50 of sales, like they're gonna go out of business very soon. So it's my job to understand from a business perspective, like us implementing these new features, like what sort of business impact, how can we actually like quantify that if we tweak this particular feature, then we should see a decrease in certain tickets, right? And we should see an increase in here. And like as we're tracking this, right, it should show up in the data that our features are being utilized. And we should also see things like, when we implemented this new feature, we see like positive events show up, like an add to cart and a checkout. And we see a decrease in like our negative kind of events, like, someone clicking off during a session. So it's my job to understand the business perspective, how this shows up in the tech ecosystem, what type of impact me tweaking this feature is going to have financially and also organizationally, and then even the workflow of how things work for the business. So the first thing I did was just like iron out what the problem was. So I went back through the conversations. That's what I'm about to do now. So what I did was like first just map out where are they getting like various communications from, right? So essentially I had to like map out like, okay, we're getting communication on Facebook and we're getting communication on OfferUp. All right. So in addition to that, I needed to map out like, okay, where's the company's like marketing and sales channels? And that's right here. So you'll see me make note right here that, okay, the marketing channels are Facebook, OfferUp, Eastbay, and then in the future they'll be doing paid ads, SEO, and content marketing. But for now, I think these are just the three. And also I have like the sales channels. So the sales channels are their own in-house or online store, and then Eastbay, Facebook, and OfferUp. Now, what I was separating here, right, is thinking through like, okay, how is this feature going to impact like, different channels? So if we implement like a search feature, or if we implement a request parts feature, right? How does this like impact our sales and marketing channel? I'll give you a prime example. The way in which the description is written, right? Like it needs to be like the same throughout like the marketing and maybe the sales channel, or like maybe it does not. And depending on what that description is, that can have an impact on the tickets that we see. And you'll see this show up. Like, so how do we begin to understand what features practically do we need to implement that solves a real business problem? So before I dive into the data, which my background is data, like sometimes when we're actually doing the data exploration, that can take so long that it doesn't allow us to like show important stakeholders like what kind of impact it will have. So right now, this is faux data, but we're going to actually update this with real data. So in this example, I am going to assume that we actually like analyze the like communication we were getting. And first of all, the very first thing that like the business needs to do is implement some sort of dashboard. So I have that over here. Like we need some sort of dashboard that is telling us like what sorts of tickets we're getting in the first place. First of all, they don't even have a ticketing system. So we need to like build or, purchase some sort of ticketing system that when a user is asking a question, like in the real world, like that would trigger some sort of ticket, that would trigger some sort of support. And you want to run I'm trying to teach my like smaller business owners how to set up their business in a way that they can scale and grow. So when I have had corporate companies in the real world, what would be happening is support would be responded. It would not be the business owner. So what I'm trying to do firstly is move the client to an actual system that is reflective more of like, a company that can scale and grow. So what I'm trying to do now is just like emulate, right? So I know that in the real world, their support ticket trigger is someone reaching out to them. But what we want to do is think about, okay, what we're trying to go is when someone actually messages us on one of these marketing channels, like our support team is actually handling that, right? So in this situation, I just assume so first thing I'm proposing is that we have some sort of dashboard that is telling us like when customers are reaching out, what are they reaching out about? That's gonna like help us understand like from a business perspective, like just understand the customer experience. And it can also for my job as a technical product manager, help me understand like what features on our website are working, what features need to be tweaked, like what new features would be important or valuable. And then like from the community, like from the actual data, be able to see like this was a good, change in a feature. And I'll actually show you guys how we'll like go about tracking that. So I'm about to do the overview. So for right now, what I did was just like I made these like this faux data. Where you go? Yeah. So I just assumed that we scraped the data and we came to this conclusion. So now I have like TN, T7, T4. In a perfect world, this would have been what the support tickets looked like prior to us implementing these features. And then 7 days after we implemented this new feature, now these are our support tickets. And then 14 days in the future after we implemented this new feature, these are our support tickets. Notice how they are decreasing over time, right? And for these kinds of, questions specifically. So this is one of the ways we would see that our new feature is working. Another way we would see that battery's about to die. So, another way we would see that is if we go over here. Now, I'm not gonna go into the data migration, like ETL design in this specific channel or this specific tutorial, but I'm just gonna show you guys where we would see that show up. So Google Analytics is hooked up to their online shop. And we will be pulling like Google Analytics might do it. And then I've also worked with a client before who uses Keen.io. And it's tracking. So our front end would have, put in specific events, right? That trigger when our feature is engaged with for our new features. So you guys will see the new features that I'm proposing. And I've also classified these features, right? So this is of ID, this, and this. This is triggered by this specific type of event. So when we label those in advance, like when we are trying to understand on the data side of things what's happening and we're building our queries, I'm going to show you guys how that's going to make it like, oh my God, so much easier. So if we implemented new features, right? So this is the path. There's an actual path to like where where a web page is, right? So it'll actually tell me, I'm going to just pop over right here, that for example, this is how Google Analytics is reporting on Marlin's auto, like these web pages, right? So if you notice how this, move this out the way. Hopefully my laptop does not die. You see how this particular path, this is the path to this like web page. If I go to Google Analytics, there is this exact same path and they're telling us how many views. It'll also tell us things like events. You see how this says key events and events counts? It will tell us when different events happen on the page. So if I go back to my chart, what we would see is, for example, one of the features, I'll just give you guys a preview. One of the features that I'm proposing based on the data that we pull and like the support tickets is that we have some sort of like a form where users can get help. So if we were to propose that this form, right, be implemented, we would see, for example, an event triggered with this ID. So we would see things like, like a click, and it would be like for the element ID, part search, right? So we would have tagged that particular form with a specific ID so that when the user triggers that, we know exactly what element, where it was, and what the target is, right? So if we see that in our data, when we're looking at our dashboards, for example, when we're analyzing how good a feature is, let me try to go into this, right? We should see that in our events, right? Like an increase in those sort of events, right? And then we should also see, like, right, we could track by session, right? So just as a preview, when a user clicks onto a website, it starts a session. And Google and other like Keen.io is going to track the behavior of that user throughout the session. So what we should see in the data, like as I was saying, is when do we see that this feature is engaged with, right? And then what happens right after, right? Do we see in the data that, what is the percentage of our sessions now where one of our new features is clicked? Of those sessions, right? How many of those basically resulted in a positive session, right? So we can quantify what a positive session